Certainly in the beginning, it was a big credibility boost to get mentioned in the media or to get posted in the media. So I was either writing a guest blog or I was being featured, my advice, I'd being quoted or something like that. That definitely helped me establish myself as a career coach.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to 7 and 8 figures without burning out. Before Purple Circle, I started and scaled several 7 and 8 figure career coaching businesses myself and consulted with 2 career coaching businesses that are now doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or just building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host Regin, and today's guest is Caroline Ceniza-Levine, an executive recruiter, keynote speaker, and career coach with a powerhouse resume. She's the founder of dreamcareerclub.com, author of Jump Ship, 10 Steps to Starting a New Career, and a senior contributor to Forbes Leadership. Caroline designs career programs for Columbia Business School's executive program and has coached leaders at companies like Google, Goldman Sachs, and McKinsey. And it's my pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Caroline.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Caroline, tell me a little bit more about what inspired you to become a coach.
Yeah, so my focus is career coaching. And so if you look at the career part, as an undergraduate in college, was working at the career services. I think there was something always that I was interested about how people got to where they got to. And so I've always been interested in people's careers. And you can see that in my earlier life in recruiting, where I interviewed thousands of people, hired thousands of people, and really saw different careers. And then there's the coaching piece. And I was one of those kids that was always trying to help people, always giving advice, even when I was small. And my first job at college was as a strategy consultant. So advisory to businesses or professional services, but again, that advisory coaching piece. And certainly as a recruiter, you're also doing some coaching when you're talking to candidates and, listening to what motivates them and what they're interested in doing next. And so I just took all of these pieces of my earlier background and just naturally who I was. And it made sense that I'm a career coach today.
And so far it has been, you'd say, 17 years and 5 months doing career coaching?
Yes. So I am in my 18th year of the business. And, the business has obviously evolved over time. So it's still new and it's still interesting for me.
How do these 17 look like right now? How does the journey look like? Almost 18 years, actually.
Yeah, I would say that some of the highlights are I started when a former boss of mine from my college days, so I was her intern, tried to recruit me to where she was. She was at a bulge bracket investment bank. She had an opening in the recruiting team. And this was 2006. And so we didn't launch formally. She tried to recruit me. And, so we reconnected and we're talking about how the market was really turning. We could see, and this is before the 2008, to see the market was turning. And I didn't feel like there was going to be a lot of recruiting to be had. I felt that the market was going to contract. And we had always talked about how much we enjoyed the coaching aspect of recruiting. And so I had proposed to her, why don't we start a career coaching business? And at the time, we talked about, she had an investment banking background. I had management consulting and media. And so these industries that a lot of people were naturally curious about and interested in. And so it made sense to join forces. And so that's what we did. I started the business actually as a partner with someone else. And we ran the business as a partnership for over 10 years. We always pursued our own clients. We essentially did our own thing, but we branded together, shared leads, and did some workshops together. And so it was nice to have typically such a solitary pursuit, with someone else. And we're still really, really, really good friends to today. But she was older than me. Again, I was turned. That's how we met. And so she retired and then I ran with the business by myself. I would say that the other big pivots within the, 18 years of being in business, I work one-on-one with people. I do some keynote speaking. I do some facilitating. I also had at times in the business run some group coaching programs, created some digital products. And I know a lot of coaches scale using those methods. I actually didn't enjoy that part of it. So I do group work when it's with an organization that they put a group together. Every now and again, I will to my audience, because I do have a newsletter and I have people who follow me over the years. I will do, a one-off group class about something that I think is interesting or happening in the market today. But for my own, retail to the public business, it's your traditional one-to-one coaching. And I found that works for me. And so that's what I do.
And since you're also the author of Jump Ship, 10 Steps to Starting a New Career, when was that published? Like within the years that you've been working as a coach?
Yeah. So we officially launched in 2008 and the book was published in 2015. It was actually originally published under the Forbes Media moniker. It was a joint venture with Amazon at the time. Forbes and Amazon released a number of exclusive to Kindle how-to books. And I was a contributor to Forbes already at the time and was writing a lot about career change. That's actually what I specialize in. And so they asked me to write the how-to portion of career change. And so that's actually how the book was birthed and how it got started. And for me, it was a chance to really put my philosophy and voice out there. And so for people who are thinking of me as a coach, I recommend to them, read the book. It's get a sense of if that's the approach that you want to follow. And then obviously, if you want to go deeper, you can work with me. But I've had people write to me saying that all they have done is read my blogs or read my book. And then they tell me about this massive transformation that they've made. So it's really rewarding all the way around.
And who do you generally work with? What is the transformation you help them achieve? You mentioned you were a career change coach, but could you share more about the target audience? Meaning, is there a specific industry that you like to work with or a specific demographic?
Yeah. So the issue is career change. People will come to me if they are considering doing something they haven't done before. So it could be people who work in one industry that want to go to another, people who are in a functional role, let's say investment banking, but they want to do, something different like development, in nonprofit, which is actually a career change that I worked on. So there's typically big pivot. It's not so much, I'm working at McKinsey and I want to work at BCG, where it's really more apples to apples. It's something where I'm working at top 3 consulting firm and I'm thinking about launching my own company, or I'm thinking about moving in-house in a C-level role. And how would I do that? That's actually a conversation I had within the last few days. So those types of big pivots are what I work on. And the transformation, it depends on where the person is at. Sometimes the transformation is just clarifying what that it is. So in the example of the strategy consultant who was thinking about a number of different things, he had 3 quite different options on the table. And my work with him was to talk through what those would mean in terms of feasibility, but in terms of what kind of work would have to be done against each of these things. And sometimes that's enough for the person to say, okay, this has helped me make a decision. And now I'm full throttle ahead in this. But sometimes they come to me either because they already know what the decision is. I'm here and I want to launch my business. So that actually was something I worked on in the last few months. And she had a very clear idea of what kind of business that she wanted to launch, motivational speaking, and really worked with me to put those pieces in place. Like growth marketing for Fast Tech started doing a very different kind of business. And she wasn't necessarily targeting high growth startups as an audience. So how do I take this background and get to where I want to get to? And so it's more about building a plan. What is the right strategy and what are the tactics there? So it's more execution than having to decide what it is. And then sometimes people toggle back and forth. They need some assistance clarifying, but they also need some assistance, figuring out how to get there.
It's not just people who want to start their business, also people who want to go in a completely different industry, you mentioned, right?
So recently worked with someone who had been in consulting at one of the big 4, knew that he wanted to do more in the area of AI, ended up joining a fast growth AI startup in, a different role because he was in professional services. And now he's basically on the engineering team. His work in professional services had been bridging business and technology. And so, now he's in-house and squarely within the engineering team. I've worked with someone who was in big pharma in operations, but really wanted to do business development and for smaller companies, for smaller biotech. And so we worked on that transition. So actually more people work with me around the traditional careers more so than starting their own business. Though I will say in this market, I feel like you have to be ready to do both. And that the line between looking for a job versus working for yourself really doesn't exist, certainly in terms of how you go about getting there.
And where do you find your potential clients? Are you utilizing LinkedIn or some other form of media that people get to find you and then reach out to you or connect with you?
Yeah. So I would say that that's also something that changed over the last 18 years. And so certainly in the beginning, because I had been, myself not an entrepreneur, right? I was working for big companies and I was, a management consultant. I was an executive recruiter, an in-house HR person. And so I wasn't known for being a career coach. Coaching is part of the job, but it is not the job. And so in the beginning, I really had to focus on, I did a lot of speaking, including pro bono speaking. I did a lot of reading. I was on social, on LinkedIn. I was on Facebook. I was recording videos. So I was doing a lot of general marketing and then of course networking with people people that I know. So clients would come to me through referrals. And that is still the top thing. I think for a lot of coaches, they will say that referrals and word of mouth is still their biggest driver. But certainly in the beginning, it was a big credibility boost to get mentioned in the media or to get posted in the media. So I was either writing a guest blog or I was being featured, my advice, I'd being quoted or something like that. That definitely helped me establish myself as a career coach. So when I started writing a column for Forbes, I had previously written a career column for money.com. And then I also was in CNBC in their executive careers column. When I appeared on CBS talking about negotiation, a lot of people came to me for negotiation. When I was on CNN, someone called me and just hired me on the spot. So certainly those types of credibility builders were super, super helpful. Now that I am much more established and also just at a different phase in my business and in my life, again, leaning on the referrals and here much more so because I'm much pickier about what I work on, who I work with. And so I find that is what's helping me. Obviously, I'm still writing for Forbes. And so I do find that to be just very pleasurable. I love to write and I love to share my advice and my voice. And so I do it because I like to do it, but also it is still a credibility builder and people still find me. I still post on LinkedIn. There's no other social media that I use. I don't enjoy being on social media. I don't do it myself personally anyway. So I find that LinkedIn, based on what I do and who I typically work with, which is typically mid-career experienced people, that's where they are. They're not going to be other places, certainly not looking for career advice in other places. And so I find that that is enough for me.
When it comes to Forbes leadership, which you mentioned you're still right now writing for as a contributor, is that like a commitment that you have ongoing with Forbes, or you basically just connect with journalists and have different stories to feature with them?
That's a commitment that I have with them. So for a certain number of posts per month, and it's been a really great relationship. Obviously, they get content from an expert in the field, and I get a revenue share based on traffic. I get a credibility builder being with a major media publication. I also find that writing for them, I get pitches from people who want to be featured. I get surveys and reports and interesting news. And so I feel like it helps me too in terms of staying on top of what's happening in the world of career, job market, HR more broadly, small business, leadership development. So there are a lot of angles that I try to cover for my column. And so it really just kind of helps me stay in tune with what's going on.
I really like that. That is a very interesting approach. I mean, I haven't had coaches in the podcast before that have also utilized a method like this to kind of like grow awareness around themselves. Although I believe you don't directly market your coaching business in that column. You're just like talking about the different topics. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely not. But of course, my name is there. Someone will, look me up and will find me. And I find that when people come to me, they'll say, I've seen your stuff. And sometimes they don't remember, honestly, if they saw it on LinkedIn or on Forbes. But even when I was invited to contribute to Forbes, and that was an invitation. So I did not pitch them. An editor came to me and asked me to write for them. And that was in 2010, I think is when I started writing for them. So it's been 15 years. And I asked her, I said, how did you find me? And she said, everywhere. So I think it's also a lesson for, people who are thinking about their marketing. Obviously, you want to know what works. And I'm constantly asking and tracking and trying to see if there are things that repeat, and I'll double down there. But at the same time, being in different places, because sometimes people just don't remember and they need to see you over and over again. So I think it is helpful, certainly when you're starting out, to be a lot of places.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I want to move away from the marketing side and talk about the goals that you're working towards the next 1 to 3 years. Is there any goal when it comes to your coaching business?
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I'm trying to do more coaching on, because I think this is such an important topic and such an important transformation, and I alluded to it before, was how the line between traditional employment and entrepreneurship is really blurry right now. And I feel like for my traditional professionals, that have the W-2 job, they can't only be wedded to that. And at the same time, I also feel like my entrepreneurs who, maybe they're attracted to it thinking they're never going to go back to corporate, also need to think about how rewarding it can be, both, from a fulfillment standpoint and a financial standpoint, for sure, to work with corporate clients. So having those corporate retainers and projects really, really can launch a business. And I do those things. That's why I work with Columbia Business School. I work with some other organizations, and it's a tentpole client. And then I can do kind of what I want to do on the retail side, one-on-one. So I think for the next 1 to 3 years, I'm really going to focus on that message, on how much people need to be thinking about both. I'm developing a course where I'm specifically going to focus on how people can manage their career and their life around this idea of being a consultant, being a freelancer, being more you as the CEO, but then also not closing the door to job search technique and, things that are going to help them in their day-to-day, 9 to 5, if you will. So definitely doubling down on that. But I would say that, 18 years into the business, I have 2 kids and they are out of college and fully launched. So my husband and I are doing more traveling. And so from a personal standpoint, I've actually dialed down my hours. That's why I don't take on as many clients as before. And just finding that right balance between working enough so I still feel like I'm in it and I'm in the market and I know what's going on, but then also just like enjoying myself more. And so that's kind of a personal/professional answer.
And when it comes to the course, it's coming out soon, like it is within the range of 1 to 3 years?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that I'm going to launch it to my audience end of summer, if not middle summer. So it's something that I've already written about. I have all the pieces. It's about this market that we're in with the volatility and, looking at companies just being very slow about hiring. And I've seen this before, the great financial crisis or the run up to Y2K. So what's interesting about my background, having been a recruiter and been at that decision table where people decide who to hire, who to fire, etc. This just feels like one of those epical moments again where the market is changing. And I just feel like people need to be aware and need to be prepared.
Thank you. Thanks so much for talking about that. Throughout your experience so far, have there been any investment on your coaching business, either on the coaching business or yourself, that you have found very valuable in it growing? That could be any coaching programs, masterminds, communities, or whatever the investment was that actually made a difference in your perspective.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an answer that I think is probably left field for you, but I am going to say rental real estate. And the reason why I say that is because I do also, have coaches. And now again, I join programs. I have both official and unofficial entrepreneur communities, as well as just my broader network. The reason why I say rental real estate is because I think I told you during my, 18-year journey, trying different things and figuring out what worked for me. When I was thinking about scaling my efforts, I did launch some groups and some digital products. And I just didn't enjoy that type of work, honestly, like focusing that and trying to build that so that it would equal my consulting business and my one-on-one work. And so I was kind of hitting myself, hitting my head against a brick wall. And then one of the things that I do enjoy that is passive is real estate. I always had an interest in it. And there were several years in the middle of my business, instead of taking the profits from the business and investing it in things specific to my business, I actually took the profits off the table and invested in various real estate properties. And while I'm not going to hang out a shingle as a real estate person, so that's not a business that I'm pursuing, when I say that it helped my coaching business was that it took a lot of the pressure off the business in terms of having to focus on it all the time, having to make the same amount of money year on year. If there were times where I wanted to spend more time with the kids, or I wanted to travel more, I wanted to do other things, or I wanted to try and pivot the kind of work that I do, and take some chances. And so I felt like that investment and just enabled me to do a lot more. And it's something that I do coach my clients on, not investing in real estate specifically, but really making them mindful of how they manage their money all over the place, not just in their business or in their career, so that they have, like I did, the runway and the foundation to take chances in the business and in life.
Yeah, well, it is one of the safest investments out there when it comes to comparing it with other investments you could make. Also, kind of like also the slowest, in my opinion, in terms of return. But definitely, it feels like the goal for you with that investment was to diversify the streams of income so that the pressure is not always into the coaching business. And that is an interesting approach that I haven't had other coaches on the podcast mention. So thanks for sharing that. Has there been anything that when you started your coaching business you wish you had known that you learned throughout these almost 18 years that you'd like to share? Maybe an unexpected lesson learned?
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches go into the field for reasons like I did, which were you enjoy coaching and you want to help people. And it's the work, right? It's the actual coaching work and the helping people in the transformation. But building a coaching business is so much more than just the coaching. So usually when people ask me for advice or, hindsight 2020, I tell them to really embrace sales and to really get ready to be thinking about how they brand themselves and show up in the world and how they run a sales call and how they follow up with people and how they think about their packaging and their pricing and the stuff that is not coaching related. I could have said the same thing about, if you're running a marketing business or if you're running, honestly, like a restaurant, right? So you're not going to spend all of your time doing the stuff that you love and that you ended up in this business for. But the flip side is that I think for people who stay in the game, the business building stuff, turns out to be fun. I would never have thought of myself as a salesperson, but now I absolutely do. And I feel so much more comfortable. If I had to be thrown into a situation where I had to sell an idea or pitch something or develop business, I can definitely do that. And I would never have said that before I started my own coaching business.
Yeah, and I think there is when you're starting out, you tend to have a different view towards sales or doing sales compared to when you actually start doing and build some experience on that. Whenever you're trying to sell people, there's this feeling of the value of what I'm doing based on the pricing. It's kind of tough to put the price on it. And I always tell the coaches that the right value, even from the beginning, can make a difference when it comes to pricing your offer. But yeah, sales is, I feel completely different. Even though I'm not very experienced into the field, I feel like there's a different view for the sales once you start doing it compared to when you haven't done it before. So thanks for sharing that perspective. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges you faced or are still facing now in growing your coaching business? Although you did mention that right now you just want to be in it enough to know how the market is going, not that you're putting a lot of effort to scale, but you want to be in it just to know where things are. Then you can focus on what the challenges were when you actually were trying to scale it.
Yeah, for sure. And in a way, it's grow or die for a business, right? You always want to be at the forefront, be considered one of the thought leaders in your industry, et cetera. And so to that extent, may not be growing my hours or growing my rates, but it certainly is always staying front of mind. But I will say in terms of actually scaling a business, I think the biggest challenge for me, and I hear this from a lot of other business owners, is there's so much noise out there as to what you should be doing and what works. And there's always this tendency to chase the next thing, right? So it's like, oh, I should be on TikTok because everyone's on TikTok, or, whatever the next platform is going to be or the next recommendation. And so it's really figuring out what works for your business, but then also what you enjoy doing and are going to keep doing. So for me, many people have been successful with social media, but it was just never something that I enjoyed. So even though I could see potentially a path to profitability, there were just so many other things that I could choose from. And so I think being able to discern what works for your business and what works for you is probably the biggest challenge. And it's an ongoing challenge because there are always going to be new recommendations and new ideas and new strategies. And it's your discipline as a business owner and it's your vision as a business owner. And that's really, what makes you the leader, is because you say no to things and you say yes to what works for you.
And so far, you'd say you have gotten better at saying no to the right things rather than saying yes and then ending up putting a lot of time with it.
I think it's helpful to have the perspective of 18 years. I think it's also helpful to have trial and error. I mean, I did do a lot of running around. So it's not like it was a straight line. There were definitely things that I tried and then said, I'm going to dial that back. And there were things that I tried that I thought, okay, this is definitely going to work. Didn't work. And then there were things that I did where it was like, I'm just going to put this out there. Oh, and then this was this is very useful to people. So, sometimes the best laid plans, as they say, right? They don't go according to plan. But so there is some experimentation. But I do think that it helps, obviously, that I'm 18 years into this and just have a lot of years of trial and error as well as perspective.
Is there any final advice you'd like to give to other coaches who are looking to scale their impact?
I would say just go for it. There has never been a better time, I feel like, to have your own business and to start doing something that you care about. It's so much easier now, I feel like, to stand up a website, to accept payments, and to just get started. And so if you're on the fence, I would just say absolutely go for it. And then I would say if you're already there, but you're not getting the results that you're getting, I would say if you're still enjoying the journey, I would keep at it, because the reality is that not everything works for everybody. And maybe you just haven't hit upon the right thing, or maybe it's just that you have to keep doing more of what you're doing. And so, sometimes results aren't instantaneous, especially in professional services like coaching. So, don't give up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caroline. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast. And for anyone who wants to find you or connect with you, they could find you on your LinkedIn, Caroline Ceniza-Levine. They could also connect with you on your website, which is cenizalevine.com or dreamcareerclub.com.
Yes. Dreamcareerclub.com is probably the easiest because I think my last name will scare a lot of people away. I also am active on LinkedIn. I don't connect to people that I don't know. So the easiest way to, stay on top of my work is either to follow me on Forbes or to visit my website. And I've got a number of free resources on there.
Thank you so much. And looking forward to maybe in the future, once you also have your course out there, maybe we have a second episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Bridget.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to 7 and 8 figures without burning out. To learn more about Purple Circle, our community, and how we can help you grow your business, visit joinpurplecircle.com.